Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Independent Thought. My name is Desmond Price. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, thank you for checking out this episode of Independent Thought. If you are a returning listener, thank you for being subscribed or being a patron or just a person who checks in every single week. Thank you for giving me an hour of your week to listen to this topic. So, boycotting Oreos. Are we really here to talk about cookies today? I mean, not quite. It was a catchy title. We'll dive into the reasoning behind it here in a second. But first, I want to say that our sources for this episode include The Hill, More Perfect Union. Go check them out. CBS, The New York Times, and Breaking Points. So let's talk about why we are here. Currently, there are strikes happening at Nabisco factories in Colorado, Illinois, Virginia, most notably in Oregon. And so our story begins in Oregon because that is where coverage is taking place of factory workers for Nabisco who are on strike now after the latest negotiations that they had with their company, Nabisco. Nabisco came to their workforce, their unionized workforce, back in May to negotiate a new round of contracts with the workers. Included in these new contract negotiations were pay cuts for the workers, and because of course not for the executives, never, and then increased healthcare costs for new employees. Now, this is all on the backs of the fact that additionally this year, Nabisco, who is owned by a company called Mondelez, has shut down factories in New Jersey and Georgia. And so now there are displaced workers throughout the country, unfortunately. And More Perfect Union, which again, go check these people out on YouTube. They do great work. Go check out what they do. Great independent media. They went to the factory outside of Portland, Oregon, to speak with some of these workers about what exactly was going on, what their grievances were, why were they on strike, essentially. Now, some of these workers had said that they were being asked to work sometimes 45, 60, and even 70 days in a row without a day off. Someone please tell me how that is legal. I need to understand how in our country it is legal to work 70 days in a row. I need to understand it. Someone please stop what you're doing, research this, come talk to me. I need to understand how that's legal. Now, on top of that, during these contract negotiations, Nabisco, again, owned by Mondelez, wanted to remove overtime pay from employees, move them to a 7-day work week with 12-hour days, also restructuring their pay, which on average would cut $40,000 a year from these workers' pay. And so at this point in time, I'm asking myself a question like, okay, is Nabisco hurting? Are they going through some financial troubles? Are people not eating enough cookies? Is that what's happening right now? But you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be surprised, that's not what's happening right now. In fact, Mondelez brought in $27 billion in revenue in 2020. And so this is not a company that is hurting for money, hurting for profits, hurting whatsoever, but still felt the need to come to their workers and ask them to work these ridiculous amounts of hours and to take less pay for it. And so I want to play a quick clip of some of these workers who are on strike outside of Nabisco's factories in Oregon. Let's hear what they had to say.
I grew up with Nabisco products, Oreo, cream and crackers, Chip Ahoy's. I knew they were made here. I knew they were made around the corner from where I live. To see those things go to another country where people are making less pay and the company's still making billions, it's disheartening.
I've been here since 1987, so I guess it'd be 34, 35 years. This company has actually squeezed everything out of it they could.
They don't even want us to step onto the grass of the property, so they're putting a fence up right on the property line. They're basically kicking the employees to the curb.
We want the community to support us. We want America to support us. We don't want you to buy Nabisco products, not during our strike. When we come back to work, we want you to support Nabisco products, but only Nabisco products made in America. If you read the back of the label, it will say made in America, or made in Mexico, or made in Canada. And we want to keep our jobs in America. We want to keep middle class. And right now they're trying to destroy it all.
And so I want to come back in a little bit here to what exactly these workers are asking from all of us and some of the issues that they addressed in that clip. But before I do that, I want to just quickly point out something that also stood out to me while I was spending some time researching for this episode. When I heard that Mondelez is sending some of their factories over into Mexico and that they're laying off workers here in America, the thing that came to my mind is I thought that we already had legislation in place that was supposed to be curbing this here in America. I mean, in fact, didn't our former president, Donald Trump, say that the 2017 tax cut was supposed to be incentivizing companies against sending jobs outside of America? In fact, on top of that, even in 2016, Donald Trump, while running for president the first time, said that he wouldn't even eat an Oreo ever again if Nabisco sent jobs to Mexico, and then passed that legislation claiming that companies weren't going to do that. But is that how it played out? Well, according to an article from The Hill, the 2017 tax cut actually allowed companies to pay half or less of the corporate tax rate on profits earned abroad. And this also exempted them from tax entirely, at a 10% return on tangible investments. Now, this is such as plants and equipment that are made overseas. So according to experts from the Tax Policy Center and from the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, they assessed that this law creates additional incentives and rewards for profits to be made overseas. In other words, it accelerated the offshoring of jobs and operations. Now, this was backed up by the Congressional Budget Office, who agreed, noting that several provisions within the 2017 tax cut may increase corporations' incentives to locate tangible assets abroad. Ultimately, many multinational corporations will pay little to nothing in U.S. taxes on profits earned by shifting call centers and factories overseas. So there it is, right? Basically, in a nutshell, one of the staples of the 2017 tax cut was your jobs are going to stay in America, people. But that was not only not true, it was literally the exact opposite, as that legislation was designed to have companies profit off of sending jobs out of our country. So again, one of the reasons that is notable to point out in regard to this conversation is because workers are finding themselves more and more, or I guess the better way to say it is less and less, in a position of bargaining power when it comes to giant corporations in America. So you're asking yourself pretty much the obvious question right now, right? Which is, if Nabisco or Mondelez, however you want to look at it, is treating you like crap, why not just go work somewhere else? Why not just go to another factory? Why not just go to another form of employment? Well, let's say you decide to leave Nabisco, but all you know is factory work. So maybe you find yourself working at another place. Maybe you find yourself working at a place like Frito-Lay, who again is another giant company, factory-based company. They're owned by PepsiCo. They make great chips. People love Doritos. Now, recently, People who worked for Frito-Lay also went on strike. This was in Kansas. Now, this went on for about a month in July. And the people there who went on strike were saying that some of the reasons they were going on strike, and this is going to sound pretty familiar, was because they had to work sometimes months at a time without a single day off. Again, how is that legal? So workers at Frito-Lay said, yes, we had to work months at a time, no days off. On top of that, we had to work with, I believe, what they called suicide shifts, where sometimes workers would be required to work shifts like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then would have to come back to work at 3 a.m. and work another 12-hour shift. People, we need to figure out how exactly the labor laws in our country are designed in a way to where companies can require employees to do that, and there is no legal repercussions whatsoever, because that is pure insanity to me. And now, after those workers went on strike, they were offered a new contract by Frito-Lay. Now, this was, again, about a month ago now. But a lot of the workers didn't want to take the new contract, and they were actually advised not to by their union, but they felt as though they had no other choice because they were running out of money. And while they were on strike, they no longer had any health insurance. And so they ended up taking this new contract, which, resulted in a 4% pay increase over a 2-year period, which, again, these workers at Frito-Lay also had not seen a pay increase over the last 6 to 8 years. So peg that against inflation, and you're actually making less money than you were when you first started there. But they're going to see a 4% increase now over the next 2 years. Ooh, and they're going to get at least 1 day off a week guaranteed. Look at that, 1 whole day off a week. And so on top of that, there was other egregious things that I saw come out of Frito-Lay while that strike was being covered back in July. I almost thought about skipping over this clip because I was trying to keep this segment a little bit shorter, but there was a clip, again, that was done by More Perfect Union. People, go check these guys out. They're amazing. More Perfect Union has a clip here of a worker from Frito-Lay who got electrocuted on the job at Frito-Lay. And this worker talks about his experience, about what it was like for him trying to essentially navigate what to do next after that happened, because you would assume that if something like that happened to you on the job, your job would find a way to take care of you. Frito-Lay not only did that, but they more or less kicked him to the curb. But let me play this quick clip so that you can hear him talk about it for himself. Here's the clip.
I had to call off the next day as a sick day. I told you I was in pain. I told you it hurts when I walk. And it was like, okay, are you gonna be here tomorrow? I was a site lead, and I know what that entails. You're a leadership of the whole warehouse. So if you have to fill in, you have to fill in. I asked for some type of relief, period, because I was still obligated to work, like picking cases and unloading trucks or rotating product on a forklift. I asked for a chair that I could sit in that would make me more comfortable while I'm doing my office work. They denied it. You're either 100% or you can't work. It just felt like they was just trying to push me out. Eventually I got an MRI by my primary doctor, and he showed that I had 2 herniated discs in my back. And he was like, you shouldn't be doing anything. They could only fix it with surgery.
And my husband still had to work this whole entire time.
They had to remove 2 of the discs in my neck because they were bulging into my spinal cord. I wasn't getting enough fluid to my brain. If I didn't have the surgery, the doctor said any small fall or accident or something like that, and I would have been paralyzed from the neck down or dead. I still have to have surgery on my lower lumbar spine.
From the moment that he couldn't work anymore and needed short-term disability, Frito-Lay abandoned us.
I had to file for short-term disability and then long-term disability. Got approved for long-term disability, but that was months later. So no income coming in.
That's a picture of the car. We were driving.
They require you to go to the doctor so many times, and the doctor has to say that you're in this condition over and over and over. But guess what? You don't have any insurance anymore through PepsiCo / Frito-Lay because they cut you off. I had to pay for that out of pocket too. Didn't have the money to do that. So guess what? I borrowed money or used credit cards or whatever I could. I even took money out my kids' piggy bank.
So I have to say, listening to that person's experience with Frito-Lay is absolutely infuriating to me. It is, in my mind, nothing short of evil that a company could see an employee get hurt on the job to that extent. And not only did they have no empathy whatsoever, they took away this man's health insurance while he was dealing with a health problem that he received from their companies. Not only did they not provide the care themselves, they took away the little amount of care that he had through their insurance. Like that is insane to me. But again, I'm illustrating another point of workers right now finding themselves with less and less bargaining power in America against these large companies. And I know that we originally started off this conversation talking about Nabisco, Mondelez, but these subjects are connected. And I'm going to continue trying to like make this point here as this segment goes along, because it's not just happening at these two places. It's not just Nabisco and Frito-Lay who are squeezing employees, basically asking them to do ridiculous things. There's also another strike happening right now in America, and that's down in Alabama. So in Tuscaloosa County, there are coal miners who have been on strike since April. Now, these coal miners work for a company called Warrior Met Coal, which is owned by a company called BlackRock. And so these coal miners have been on strike this whole time since April. And the media has largely, and I mean largely, not paid attention to them whatsoever. In fact, it wasn't until 3 weeks ago when those coal miners gathered themselves up and went up to Manhattan to protest in front of BlackRock itself on Wall Street, that they got their first piece of mainstream coverage after 4 months of protesting. And this isn't just some small demonstration. These workers down there, this is actually the largest the largest strike in Alabama in the last 40 years. And, you know, we're talking about coal miners right now. I know some people might be rolling their eyes like, oh, these are coal miners. Who really cares? You know, what they do is bad for the environment. No. These are working class people who are just doing their best to survive. And again, another instance of working class people being squeezed by giant multinational corporations. I mean, these people aren't even really asking for that much. I mean, coal miners are in mines on a day in and day out basis, you know, doing a very physically demanding job. They have to deal with potential health risks that come from being in a mine, including things like black lung, which please check that out. It's pretty horrific what can happen to people who are obviously in mines all the time. But these workers, what are they asking for? These Alabama coal miners, they're basically asking for the return of their vacation days that got taken away from them. They had their overtime taken away from them. They're asking for that back. And they're asking for the pay that they used to have, not for an increase, but the pay they used to have. Because when Warrior Met Coal bought out their previous owner and they came in and negotiated contracts with these workers, they decided to pay them a lot less money. And so now they're just fighting to get what they had in 2016. And so again, we have another instance of workers here in America who are just more or less trying to do whatever they can just to squeeze out a little bit of dignity. But, you know, thankfully for these previous 3 entities that I'm referring to, these workers at Nabisco, Frito-Lay, and Warrior Met, they have unions behind them. But as I've mentioned in previous episodes, having a union behind you is not exactly normal in America anymore. As by my previous episode that I did called Amazon Workers in Alabama. Now, I was referencing earlier this year that the workers down there in Bessemer, Alabama, they were trying to unionize to have a little bit more help because of the conditions that they were dealing with down in the Amazon fulfillment centers, where I'm not going to get into it all over again because I did a whole episode on it, but please go check that out. But in a nutshell, workers down at this Alabama facility were more or less just saying that it was impossible to maintain the standards that Amazon was asking them to commit to on a day in and day out basis. Amazon, calls it their rate, which is just how often you have to be on task while you work for them. One of the figures that I was able to research while doing that episode was that workers are asked to pick and box 300 items per hour. And if they don't do that, then they can get written up for it. And after a certain amount of write-ups, you are fired. And they mark everything against what they call rate. So even going to the bathroom counts against you. That's time that you're not picking stuff in their mind. And so the reason why I bring this up, why I bring up Amazon, why I bring up Warrior Met Coal, why I bring up Frito-Lay. I know that we started off talking about Nabisco, but this is honestly a microcosm of what's happening across this country right now. Workers as a whole are being squeezed by these giant companies. And these giant companies are not hurting whatsoever. They're not hurting. They're not seeing dips in their revenue. They're not seeing dips in profit whatsoever. We are seeing, as time goes on, and everyone's been talking about this on the political spectrum, about the levels of income inequality happening here in America. Multinational corporations are making record amounts of profit. Their stock prices are going through the roof. CEO pay is going through the roof. These companies are more valuable now, more profitable now than they've ever been. And yet they can't even give workers at these plants, at these factories, they're working class people of this country, they have to beg just to get small levels of dignity, small levels of humanity, just to, in the case of Amazon, just to get bathroom breaks, in the case of Frito-Lay, to get one day off, in the case of these Amazon workers, these coal miners in Alabama, just for them just to get pay they used to have. This is absolutely incredible to me. I mean, right now, there is a system in place that allows all of this to be legal, and that's an absolute travesty to me. So what can we do? What can we do as the average individual person who's listening to this right now, who's having this discussion? Just please share this information, whether you're sharing this episode or if you're looking up articles about what's going on with these several different strikes around the country. Or again, check out More Perfect Union, share the videos that they put out all the time. They are doing great journalism. Please go check them out. I mean, we need more eyeballs, more ears on this content. What really needs to happen here is that the workers of this country need to know that everyone else has their back, because right now, too many of these companies are basically able to operate this way because there's no repercussions coming their way whatsoever. Our government, which is supposed to be keeping companies like this in check, have basically just let these companies do whatever the hell they want to. And so call these people, your representatives, call them, ask them what the hell they're doing. They only work half the year anyway. They work half the year. And then they, have the audacity to tell the rest of us that we need to get back to work and work harder and so on and so forth. Call these people, ask them what the hell they're doing, ask them why there isn't legislation to protect workers around this country, and share this information. Share it on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, share it everywhere, because the more spotlight that we put on these companies and the BS that they're doing to their workers, the less likely it'll be that it'll continue to happen. So I feel as though we truly have the power in this situation. And like that like that one worker said in the Nabisco clip, for the time being, just stop buying Oreos. Stop buying Oreos. Stop buying all Nabisco products for the time being. It is a travesty what's happening with these Nabisco plants right now. And so let's all do a little bit to chip in to put an extra spotlight on what's happening with these workers. I'll also have a GoFundMe link in the description of this episode for the workers who are on strike in Oregon right now. And so with all that being said, thank you so much for listening to this portion of the episode. We're going to take a quick break, but you'll be hearing some messages from my sponsors. And when we come back, there will be a conversation with my guest for this week, a brand new conversation. So make sure you stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back from the break, everyone. Thank you for sticking with me through this episode of Independent Thought. So first, I want to thank my guest, Sarah, the host of the I Speak Dead People podcast. It was a pleasure to have you on. I want to just talk a little bit more about this subject before we transition. One of the things that I like to do with this podcast is to bring on a diversity of guests. You know, I strive to try to bring on people who will have different conversations, bring on different perspectives, you know, because I realize one of the things that matters to me when it comes to this podcast is that people are investing an hour of their week to listen to what is said on this podcast. And I appreciate that truly, just like I really do. Like it means a lot to me that people would invest their most important commodity, which is time. And so in order to more or less provide what I feel as though is a good place for people to be spending their time with me every week, it's important to me to bring on different types of conversations. And so the conversation that I just had with Sarah is something that I've never had on this podcast before. Not only that, I mean, it's just a conversation that people just don't really have in general, talking about loss. And I have to say, I mean, I think going into the conversation, I was a little kind of trepidatious about it myself because it is such a taboo topic in our society, talking about death, talking about loss, talking about grief. But, you know, the more that I've given thought to it, the more that it really shouldn't be that way. You know, we really should be able to have these conversations a little more plainly, a little more openly, without so much stigma attached to it. Grief is something, I mean, loss. I think she kind of said it very well, where she said, like, if you haven't lost somebody yet, you will. Unfortunately, that is a part of being human. And so I think we all should maybe have a little more of a healthy relationship with learning how to deal with the trauma that comes with losing someone who's important to you. So, Sarah, thank you for coming on and having that conversation with me. I hope that everyone who listens to this episode gets as much out of that conversation as I did. And I, again, encourage everyone to go check out her podcast. The link is in the description. So click on the description below and you will see some links. So please go check out her podcast. Now, to finish out this episode, I just want to one more time say a little blurb about the workers here in our country. So there have been a lot of conversations in our society recently about workers and worker shortages and why aren't people at work, or is it unemployment benefits, or are they just lazy, so on and so forth. It's a tiring conversation because it always puts it feels like that conversation puts the blame on the workers for why they are not rushing back to some of these jobs. And it's never really well-paying jobs that people aren't rushing back to. It's always these lower tier jobs. And when I hear stories like I've heard with how Nabisco workers are being treated, how people are being treated at Amazon, how these coal miners are being treated, how these Frito-Lay workers are being treated, it's like, these are just 4 examples. I mean, if you really wanted to do a full case study, I mean, I'm sure you could find hundreds, if not thousands, of companies around this country. I'm not saying all companies are bad, but there are so many of them that go out of their way to squeeze their employees for every ounce that they possibly can. It's remarkable to me that we don't have more attention on this, that it's become so normal that we are now so numb to it. And that is a true travesty, because we should all just value ourselves more than that. We should value our fellow person more than that. Those should not be normal working conditions. And they should not be okay for companies to treat us like we're less than robots. It is absolute insanity to me. And so, with all that being said, I truly meant what I was saying at the end of the segment there. Share this information, share this episode, share some articles, share what you have learned, put the spotlight on these companies. Don't let them get away with this, and stop eating Oreos for a little while. They're not that good anyway. I'm sorry, they are that good. Stop eating them anyway. Now, coming up next on the podcast, I will be having some more candidate episodes. So be on the lookout for that. If you are subscribed, you will not miss it. So make sure you are subscribed. Hit the follow or subscribe button. It is right next to my logo on whatever platform you are listening to this on right now. Hit the button. There's even a bell I hear that you can click as well. There's a boomer coming out of me. So on top of that, there will also be more panel episodes that will be coming in the future. So don't forget to check out that. If you liked the previous panels, please let me know. Please DM me. Let me know how the panelists, felt to you. If the episode was too long, if it was too short, let me know what you thought about it. I want to hear your thoughts. So please reach out to me and let me know how you felt about those panels. More panels are on the way, hopefully very soon. And last but not least, there was a continuation of my conversation with Sarah, which didn't all get to fit into the segment in this episode. So I turned the rest of it into a bonus episode. So once again, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any future content. Thank you for checking in with the podcast this week. We will see you next time. Go call someone. No, that's a terrible ending.